Breakfast at Tiffany's and bottles of bubbles. Girls with tattoos who like getting in trouble. Lashes and diamonds, ATM machines. Buy myself all of my favorite things. Been through some bad shit, I should be a sad bitch. Who would have thought it turned me to a savage? Rather be tied up with calls and not strings. Write my own checks, cause I write what I sing. My wrist, stop watching. My neck is flossing. Make big deposit. My gloss is popping. You like my hair? She thinks just bought it. I see it. I like it. I want it. I got 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 it. You like my hair? She thinks just bought it. I see it. I like it. I want it. I got it. Wearing a ring, but ain't gonna be no misses. Bought matching diamonds for 6 of my bitches. I'd rather spoil all my friends with my riches. Think retail therapy's my new addiction. Whoever said money can't solve your problem must have not had enough money to solve them. They say which one, I say nah, I want all of them. Happiness is the same price as red bottoms. My smile is beaming, my skin is gleaming. The way it shines, I know you've seen it. I bought a crib just for a closet, both his and hers. I want it, I got it. 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 You like my hair? She thinks just bought it. I see it, I like it. I want it, I got it. Receipts be looking like phone numbers. If it ain't money, then wrong number. Black card is my business card. The way we setting the tone. I don't mean to brag, but I be like, put it in the bag, yeah. When you see them racks, they stack up like my ass, yeah. Shoot, go from the store to the booth, make it all back in one whoop. Give me the loot, never mind, I got the juice. Nothing but net when we shoot. Look at my neck, look at my jet. Ain't got no money to pay me respect. Ain't no budget when I'm on the set. If I like it, then that's what I get. I want it, I got it. 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 You like my hair? She thinks just bought it. I see it, I like it. I want it, I got it.
Hello all. My name's Chris. I'm the pastor at Kindred UMC.
Hey, I'm Courtney. I'm the Director of Community Engagement at Kindred UMC.
My name's Preston, and I don't know where to look today.
And
Just this one,
Okay.
right here.
And you're excited about The Bachelor starting back this Tuesday.
Yeah!
The best show.
Cute.
Yep.
I'm excited about The Bachelor coming back on Tuesday.
You think jumping off a 2-story roof would break my legs?
Huh?
Yeah. I do.
Anyway, so we're
Yes, I do think.
I see what you did there.
and she's not getting a roast.
Well, welcome back once again. We just had our annual church conference, and your husband said some very nice things
I
about
heard
me.
him say
Chris
that.
started crying.
And I felt very good about myself.
Chris
and,
cried.
And it didn't hurt at all that he said them in front of my boss. And I didn't even pay him to do it or anything. He
Yeah.
just did it all by himself. It was very nice.
Oh, great.
You should know, I mentioned that you and he are our chief evangelists, and I don't know what I would do without either of you.
Wow,
So
that's
you should
very
know
nice.
that, because you weren't there, and it's not near as nice to hear things
Right.
that you don't hear at all.
That's very nice. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
I
And
love
you both will
being
be compensated after the show. Now,
Right.
here. Dak Prescott will undergo ankle surgery Sunday night.
Who cares? I mean, I'm
Jesus
sure.
cares.
I actually think a lot of people care.
I care. He's my fantasy quarterback.
just like we do.
Yeah, that's right.
That's right.
That's right. Any things? So we literally wrapped up our series on the Book of Genesis last week, and we're gonna do. We've got kind of some like short throw stuff here, because we've got Thanksgiving and then Advent coming up, and it just messes up the schedule. Any final thoughts on Genesis before we move on to the Gospel of Luke?
Yes.
Okay.
Do you have anything first?
No.
Okay, because I might go on a tangent.
Oh boy.
I want to remind who's listening, watching, whatever, the word Genesis does mean beginning. And it doesn't mean that the beginning, in the beginning. There's a lot of beginnings here. Each of these stories is a tie to some beginning or some storytelling of a beginning of a different type of culture, of a different type, a way of thinking of things, of a different way to... Beginnings. The Chicago song, which was amazing.
Which Joe Rogan podcast guest did you hear that from?
No. Don't say it. There's a lot of them. But the lawyer guy? The attorney guy?
The attorney who speaks Sanskrit and right. I can't remember his name. We're not doing justice.
Manskrish. He's got a weird-ish name. Anyway, doesn't matter. But
the
point...
Gal Gadot. Khabib.
Gal Gadot Khabib.
That's a UFC reference for all those who have no idea what's happening right now. I'm not having a stroke. I just switched from scholarly translation of ancient Greek and Christian culture into punching people in the face while they're on the ground.
Right. Well, to blow smoke in your direction again, Chris is really the reason we could dive into these stories by telling us that they are stories and us treating them that way instead of treating them like scripture, which scripture means writing anyway, but we tend to over-exaggerate and put everything on a pedestal and not really dive into it as if somebody wrote it.
It's the literalism.
Yes.
You know?
Yeah.
Because I definitely, thank you very much. I received that compliment as awkwardly as I possibly can, and I give you thanks for sharing that with me. It does make me feel good words of affirmation are a big deal to me.
Yes.
I would say that what we're doing is actually treating them like scripture.
Well,
what we're doing is going like, okay, what is the original writer's intent? How would the people have heard it? What meaning would they have made? And how does that translate to us? Rather than going, this is the word of God and you shall not,
So the fun tidbit, which is a big bit, the tidbig, where did it get misconstrued? In our history of teaching and advertising and marketing of this stuff.
Arguably, it started almost immediately. It really took a foothold in the Council of Nicaea, and when Constantine, the Roman emperor of the time, was looking for a way to unify the empire, and this grassroots Christian movement was taking hold, and so he made a decision that all of the Roman Empire was going to be Christian, despite the fact that he himself was not Christian. And then that led to the Council of Nicaea, where it became really, really important that we all agree on what's true and what's not. And anyone who believes it's not true is a witch. And then that led to the Dark Ages later. Much, much later.
Ironically, when you burn a witch, darkness spreads instead of light. But to tie back to another story, this goes back to Babel a lot. We're all the same here. Build a wall around us. Grow a tower instead. All of the above, because we're all here and they're out there, and no inviting them in because we don't do that.
I think the Council of Nicaea is a real-world example of the Tower of Babel story that we talked about. I completely concur.
Yeah.
And then we also do it all the time.
Yep.
So as we go into this story, so this is parable. It's actually 3 parables, but we're going to focus on one. But they come in a group of 3, and we'll talk more about that. Again, it's really important for us to not look at this literally, but instead look at it literarily, particularly because this is a parable, this is a story. But we're also let's not rely too heavily on the fact that Jesus actually said these words verbatim. Because this Gospel of Luke was written decades after Jesus' death, so this more accurately reflects the teachings of the Christian community that Jesus' death and resurrection established 50 years prior, or thereabout. I don't have the exact numbers, but nobody does, but you get it. So we're going to look at the parable of the Prodigal Son. We're going to look at, this is Luke chapter 15. We're going to start at verse 11 when we read. However, visual cue to myself for editing later. I'm going to put the Bible down because I'm not going to read it yet. However, before we get into the parable of the prodigal son, we need to understand that Jesus literally tells 2 other parables before this one. So he's basically gathered a crowd and he's preaching, and the Pharisees, who are the scribes and the Pharisees, who are the religious power of the day, they come and they basically accuse him of, this guy has dinner with tax collectors and sinners. Tax collectors were puppets of the Roman Empire. They made their money by taking from other people. They were generally regarded as betrayers and snitches and that kind of thing. So the scribes and the Pharisees are like, this guy is hanging out with sinners and tax collectors. Like, he can't be righteous. This guy's an asshole. He's hanging out with assholes, I want
to point this out too. There's a few more sides to this as well. Pharisees also in bed with the tax collectors too. It's very, very politician-y, modern day sounding of you calling out bad people to the middle class central public, going, hey, he is hanging out with people that you hate. Not saying we also have ties to them in the back that you can't go into yet.
I don't have immediate knowledge of that.
No, I know.
I'd have to do research on that.
But it's fun to explore.
They're definitely in bed with Rome.
Right.
Like, the reason they have power is because of their cooperation with the pagan power.
So maybe not specifically the higher up in the accounting side of it, and that's just speaking in the literalisms again. But higher ups are also sinful too.
Oh yeah.
So it's not he's not reaching to the central, he's only going to the extreme ends type of thing.
Well, so fundamentally what you're getting at, which is one of the underlying fundamental questions, is what is the nature of sin?
Right.
So the scribes and the Pharisees, and so there's zealots in this particular time in history when Jesus was alive, like literally was born and crucified, because when you're talking about theology, Jesus is alive becomes a very problematic phrase when you're trying to zero in on. No, I mean like the time from like 4 CE to like 37 CE, like the time he was alive, So during that first century Jewish culture, there were scribes, there were Pharisees, there were zealots, and they basically all had this understanding of sin that was about behaving correctly according to the law in one way or another. I can break down all 3 of those groups in far more detail, but that would take up the whole time. We're not going to do that. But basically their idea of sin was this idea that you're not following these rules in particular, and the more literal we can follow these rules, the better. And that was their idea. And they believed that Rome had power and that God wasn't rescuing them from political oppression, because there were so many sinning Jewish people. And so if these people would just do the right thing and act right, then God would rescue us from Rome and we would all be fine. And so they're mad at Jesus because he's this rabbi who's actually fraternizing with all these people who are ruining the whole thing. You're the reason that God's not rescuing us, and you're having dinner with him, you asshole. That's kind of what's going on. And they accuse him. They're straight up, you are dining with tax collectors and sinners. And then he tells 3 stories. The first one is the parable of the lost sheep. And it's you've probably heard it many times. What shepherd does not leave the 99 to go find the one? And that's something they would have understood. And he says, the kingdom of heaven is like this: a shepherd who leaves the 99 to go find the one who's lost. And then he says also, the lost coin. The kingdom of heaven is like this: a woman who has 10 silver coins but then loses one, and then scours the whole house, because silver coin is very valuable. Scours the whole house, and then when she finds that silver coin, she calls her friends and rejoices because she's found her lost coin. That's what the kingdom of heaven is like. And you're kind of left with this, what do you mean? Who's the shepherd? Who's the lady? What's the coin? What do you mean? Then he goes on to the parable of the prodigal son, and I'm going to, before the end of this live show, reveal what I think the real name of this parable is, and it's not prodigal son. So first of all, you should know that the word prodigal, do you know what the word prodigal means? I had to look it up.
Yes, but I'll say no.
No.
Okay. Prodigal, it means like extravagant, generous beyond wisdom, like frivolous, like you just spend all your money, you know? And then you go like, oh shit, I'm out of money. That's prodigal.
Okay.
So way too extravagant beyond reasonableness. That's what prodigal means. So this is the parable of the prodigal son, which we will rename later. This is picking up at the Gospel of Luke, which is in the back part of the Bible, chapter 15, verse 11, and we're going to read through to 24. Remember who he's talking to. He's talking to a group of sinners, tax collectors, and Pharisees and scribes who have accused him of talking to sinners and tax collectors. So it's a mixed crowd right now, okay? Then Jesus said, verse 11, then Jesus said, there was a man who had 2 sons. The younger of them said to his father, Father, give me the share of the property that will belong to me. So he divided his property between them. A few days later, the younger son gathered all he had and traveled to a distant country, and there he squandered his property in dissolute living. When he had spent everything, a severe famine took place throughout the country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to one of the citizens of that country, who sent him to his fields to feed the pigs. It should be noted, a Jewish man feeding pigs, pretty like
Low.
yeah, it's like lowest of low. You don't eat pig, let alone serve pigs. Verse 16, he would gladly have filled himself with the pods that the pigs were eating, and no one gave him anything. But when he came to himself, he said, I love that phrase, by the way, he came to himself. I put a lot of stock in the phrase self-possessed.
I think it's funny. Like the visual is funny. So you're in a pen of pigs eating what they're eating, and you like,
wanting to
up.
eat them. He can't. It's not his property. He's not allowed. So he's not. He like the phrase is he wished he would have been able to eat what they were eating, but he can't even do that.
Oh, he'd long to.
Yeah.
Okay.
He wishes he could eat what the slop that the pigs are eating.
But it's this very like Ace Ventura moment, throwback Ace Ventura moment of him like living with the animals and stuff, and he like. You just see his head pop out of nowhere, like above the hippos, like he's swimming with them, and like wiggles his ears.
That's the second one, right?
Yeah, it's in When Nature Calls.
He's like with the lions or something, and he pulls up, and he's gone.
Yeah, because it's got the secret agent man playing in the background because he's following the guy.
Right. Yeah.
It's just in the Serengeti, pops up.
All right, don't distract me because I will literally start quoting that movie a lot. I'm actively turning away from it.
We still have to watch it.
We should watch it.
We did Pet Detective.
What
we shall watch it.
Oh,
Pet Detective, the second one.
Okay.
Yeah.
When
Nature Calls, my favorite movie of all time.
Okay, let's watch it.
All time. Okay. All right. So back at verse 16, he would gladly have filled himself with the pods that the pigs were eating, and no one gave him anything. But when he came to himself, he said, "How many of my father's hired hands have bread enough and to spare? But here I am dying of hunger. I will get up and go to my father, and I will say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Treat me like one of your hired hands. So he set off, and he went to his father. But while he was still far off, this makes me cry every time.
Maybe not anymore when I ask this question.
So he set off and went to his father, but while he was still far away, his father saw him and was filled with compassion. He ran and put his arms around him and kissed him. Then the son said to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. But the father said to his slaves, Quickly, bring out a robe, the best one, and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet, and get the fatted calf and kill it. And let us eat and celebrate, for this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He is lost and is found. He was lost and is found. And they began to celebrate. Gets me every time. We're going to stop there. There is more to the story.
The next part's the best part.
Well, we're going to cover that next week.
Okay, great.
There is more to the story, but let us stop there for tonight and let us focus on this message. So, first of all, questions, comments, observations? Are there things? Because I have a lot of like cultural significance to point out in the story.
Yeah. Well, touching on the other parables already, we've got the feeling of I've lost something in my pack type of thing, and instead of continuing with the pack as a wolf would and go, we're just going to leave him and move on. If we find him, we find him. If not, we have to move.
The weak fall behind. And that's
the weak fall behind. In a pack mentality.
You've seen The Walking Dead?
I've seen The Walking Dead.
I have not seen The Walking Dead.
Well, there might be a Bachelor edition coming up. The son coming in really shows and showcases this turning from a pack mentality, turning from being an animal and going, no, we have to shun him. He's an abomination to us. It's not anything that's going to help us progress here. Mm-hmm. Meanwhile, the father, with the compassion, which is a word we've all had to learn and is hard to do.
You might even call it's simultaneously the least and most human characteristic there is.
It's unconditional.
It's
unfair, it's unjust to every other party. If it was a legal case and this had happened in a legal square setting, he is not right here. He is unjust. This is unfair.
It's the opposite of justice, but not in a bad way. It's the opposite of justice in a way that is gracious.
Right.
It's grace. It's undeserved. It's unearned.
Yes.
And that's one of the reasons that this story absolutely gets me. Do you have more?
Yes.
Okay.
The Pharisees calling out Jesus, being with we touched on it before. So I'd love for you to go into that and see if you can find something there. I know that's kind of just history stuff of the Pharisees just being in bed with. It's just very it's politician-y sounding. So it's like, there's no way we're in trouble here. He's definitely in the wrong. Get it off of us. Get it off.
Can you make a note to bring it up next week?
I'll start it and then
I'll look into it.
Yada yada yada.
Because I can do some studying about. I don't know that I've drawn a direct connection there, but I probably have read something about it and not filed it away yet.
Yep. Know? I also have wild and bold because I like that word a lot. It's very fun. It's very fun, just generalized. You know what's going on.
I might say rowdy.
Rowdy is great. Yeah.
That's what we've been described as.
This is
Kindred UMC. Oh, they rowdy.
We're rowdy.
Watch out. If you go over there, they rowdy.
They're a little rowdy.
Yeah. This is a literal question. The word pods, is that something back in that culture they'd have?
It's like the
like bean pods?
Okay. And like the corn husks and like kind of like it's like pigs get leftovers.
Yeah.
You know, so you harvest whatever you're growing, and I don't know what they exactly would have been growing. It's also a hypothetical story, but
yeah.
And then you kind of let's take corn for example, because I actually know a little bit about corn. So when you grow corn, you grow it up this tall, and then it has it comes in a pod, and you have to husk the corn, and you want the little golden yellow parts. You don't want all the green bullshit, you know?
By the way, a GMO product by the time it reached Israel. If it were in that time is what I'm saying.
I'm pretty sure they didn't grow corn there. I think that was a development that happened later where somebody genetically... Anyway, I digress.
In that timing, wherever it was GMO by then.
By then, GMO. Okay, so let's talk cultural elements of the story that can easily be missed.
Yeah.
So first of all, father with two sons, and is a wealthy guy. He owns land, has servants, has herds. He's a wealthy man. And he has two sons. In Hebrew culture, first century Jewish culture in particular, when the father dies, the inheritance is split between all of his sons. The first son gets a double portion. So the oldest son gets twice as much as any of the other sons. So when this younger son comes to his father and says, "Give me my inheritance now," he's saying two things. One, he's saying, "I wish you were dead." That's a really strong, this is something that does not happen until the father dies. You know, so give me my inheritance now. The second is, the wealth of would have been tied up in his land. So he's telling his father, sell 1/3 of your land, give up your, which would have had ramifications as far as status in the community. It would have had all kinds of embarrassing and shameful ramifications. So not only I wish you were dead, but sell 1/3 of your land. So when Jesus tells the story to this crowd, it would have been so unfathomably unbelievable that that request was even made. And they probably would have braced themselves because this son is about to maybe be murdered by his own father. Like, this father is going to beat the shit out of this kid. And I hope he survives. Because how dare you? How dare you say that to me?
How do we modernize that then? Because if
we don't have that high of stakes.
So I'm wondering if we use it as information, type of thing. Like a teenager or someone of that age telling a parent, you don't know what you're teaching me, something of that nature. Just, it seems here, because we're going the status way of explaining this instead of the financials, because money is just money.
Well, it's all,
everywhere.
it is a pretty significant financial
I think the status way is more interesting. I've never heard that before.
Well, it has a lot to do. So one of the things that's hard to connect with is the fact that in especially ancient cultures, but ancient Middle East cultures in particular, and Africa too, have incredibly high regard for hospitality, and also your status is wrapped up in how much land you own, and that's why sons are so important in that culture also. So all of this status is wrapped up, all these things that are wrapped up in status are essentially getting at the same thing, which is how much security do you have in terms of farmland? That's why sons are important, because women are weaker, sorry ladies, physically weaker, just broadly speaking, genetically, please don't come at me. But daughters in that culture were less valuable because they couldn't work the land and they weren't supposed to work the land. And even if they did, it was culturally unacceptable for them to do. So you might have a daughter who's perfectly capable of tilling the fields, but you don't do that because that is a status thing. You don't have your daughters work the land. What kind of man are you where your daughter's working your land for you? And so you need land and you need sons. And then also hospitality is another thing. I produce so much, I can freely give it away to anyone who comes by my house, So all of these things, it really boils down to, can you feed yourself? Can you produce food? That determines what your status is, and which makes sense in a desert culture, in a kind of a dry place. How much food you can grow would be the thing that rises to the top as the most important status symbol. So all of this to say, this son is coming to his father and saying, sell 1/3 of your land, I don't value you, and I'm leaving. So you're losing your land, you're losing your son, and also I wish you were dead.
But the losing value part is where I think we're on the same page with, again, it's thinking of a story you've heard a million times. Tale as old as time. Maybe not.
Well,
it's still happening.
Getting an idea of how the first readers would have heard it sheds, it makes it a lot more interesting. It sheds a lot of new light on it, So, okay, so that's the kind of the opening part of this particular parable. Now, all the audience is oh my God, this kid's about to get his ass beat by his father, probably with a weapon, probably with some kind of a blunt object. And then the father says the craziest shit ever, which is, okay. And he does it. And he sells his 1/3 of his land, liquidates it, and hands that over to his son. And his youngest son takes his property and goes and he prodigals it. He squanders it. He spends it on what dissolute living is what it's called. And he just utterly squanders it. Now, this would have put the listeners into a place that they can't even, it's probably going to be hard for them to even imagine that happening. And so now something remarkable happens, and I think these moments are wonderful human moments, and I love the phrase, he came to himself. Like, he hits rock bottom. It's the lowest possible form. A wealthy, aristocratic Jewish man who is feeding pigs and is jealous of the pigs. And so he comes up with this plan in this rock bottom moment. And his plan is essentially, I'm going to go to my father. I'm going to confess. I'm not going to claim sonship. That would be too much to ask. But what I'll do is I'll beg to be a hired hand. Now this is an important cultural distinction. He's not asking to be son. He's not asking to be a slave. Because a slave would have been allowed to live on the estate. A slave would have lived on the estate, would not have earned any wages, but would be, in Jewish culture, under the direct care of the father, the one who owns the estate. And there were lots of rules and laws about how you had to treat your slaves. They were indentured servants, and it's not great, but it's not the same as like American slavery. Like, you would have wanted to be a servant under a master's care rather than being a hired hand who's like, hey, you come and do the job and I'll give you some wages and then you're on your own, asshole. Versus, I am under the direct care of my master who is a powerful and status man, in Jewish culture. So he's not claiming sonship, he's not claiming servanthood, he's claiming hired hand. Now, the thing about a hired hand is that you can earn a wage. And he even says it, how many of my father's hired hands have bread enough and then to spare? So, like, he's not only going to be able to feed himself, but he'll also be able to repay his father. If he does this plan and if his father accepts it, he'll be able to pay his father back. He'll be able to earn his way back into the good graces of his father. And that's an important little subtle cultural thing that we miss. That is, I think, an intentional focus of whoever wrote Luke, that he's telling us something with that. This son intends to earn his way back into the good graces of his father. And so he girds up his loins, he gets up, and he goes. And I love, there's something really funny about, they tell you his monologue. When he's alone in the pigsty, he says, I'll say this, and then I'll ask for this. And then he goes and he as he's approaching, his father sees him. Now, to me, that implies something, that this father's been watching.
Yep.
Yeah.
This father's been scanning the horizon. When's he gonna come? When's he gonna come? The story hearers and the readers of this would have expected for this father, when he sees this son coming, all right, let's see what this little shit has to say. And then Jesus surprises everyone again by saying that he runs to meet him. Now, if you are a wealthy Jewish patriarch in the first century, you do not run. You don't run. You pay people to run. And here's what I want you to really picture. The garb of first century Middle Eastern people. It's robes. They're not wearing pants. They're not wearing sneakers. It's robes and sandals. If you're going to run to meet your son, what do you have to do? You have to pick up your robe. You have to kick off your sandals, and you have to run. It is completely embarrassing and not distinguished at all.
It's unabashed.
Yeah.
It's unabashed.
And so this father picks up his robes and he kicks off his sandals and he runs towards his son. And then he grabs him, and the son starts his speech. Son starts his speech. I have sinned before heaven and before you. I am not worthy to be your son. And like the father doesn't even listen to what he's saying. Like he doesn't even pay any attention to what he's saying. He's just like, quick, get the robe, get the ring, the fatted calf. Now here's the other thing about the fatted calf. First century Jews don't eat meat. Very, very, very rarely do you eat meat. It is a delicacy. And fatted calf is it's like grade A Wagyu beef. It's like, this is a once in a lifetime banquet if you're gonna kill and cook the fatted calf. It is the 50-year bottle of wine that you've been saving for the very, very special occasion for when it's like, you don't even know what that occasion's gonna be. You're just waiting for something and you'll know it when it gets there, you know? It is this huge deal. So the ring is a signet ring, that's how families sign contracts. So he's essentially bestowing sonship on him again, whether, like, he doesn't even ask for it. And he's saying, no, get the signet ring, put it on his finger. Get the best robe, put it around him. And then he goes on to say, my son was dead and is now alive. And like, my son is the first thing he says, you know, like, get the robe, get the ring, kill the calf, we're eating tonight, my son, like, you know? And it's this like amazingly overindulgent, overly gracious response. And then of course, you know, they celebrate, and this is the best night of this father's life. So, I talked a lot about prodigal son is what we typically call this. And prodigal means, you remember?
Living lavishly, spending exuberantly, usually with something that is not yours.
Overly generous, overly
I
exaggerated.
promised I was listening. I just was so engrossed in what you were saying.
It's taking mommy's
I
money
don't know.
and going to
There's
Vegas.
something about putting people on the spot too. I don't know. If you gave me multiple choices, I could find it. Yeah. So, prodigal son who goes and squanders and spends frivolously. I would call this, and this is from Tim Keller. Shout out to Tim Keller. He's a wonderful scholar, a wonderful theologian. I've been stealing from him all night. This parable should and really is truly the prodigal God.
Oh.
This is a God who is generous beyond wisdom, like foolishly, stupidly, extravagantly gracious. And he's speaking to the tax collectors and the sinners and the Pharisees and the scribes. The tax collectors and the sinners are people who have walked away. They're people who have given up on this relationship with a father. They're people who, even if they tried, had no ability to earn their way back into the good graces of God. And the scribes who are saying, you're damn right. You don't. And there's nothing you can do to get into the good graces of God. Even if you started behaving as best as you could, like they were just real, like, get your shit together, you dumb pieces of shit. Like they were just really, and then Jesus comes in and says, there is a God who is so foolish that he's willing to take you back. Like, there's a God who is so prodigal, who is so overly generous, that he would be so thrilled to find you a lost sheep or you a lost coin, that he would gather all the angels of heaven to celebrate your return. Like gospel good news, and also pretty confrontational news to the powers that be. So, I'll pause there. Does that make you think of anything? Does that remind you of anything? Do you connect with that in any way?
Think of a song. Is that the first song we ever talked about sharing?
Huh?
When you and I were painting your room.
Oh, Reckless Love?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was like our student ministry's like theme song for forever and ever and ever and ever.
I don't know it.
I'm sorry.
Reckless Love by Corey Asbury?
Are you being sarcastic?
I'm not
You really-
sarcastic. I was a worship director
in the 80s with Avalon and stuff? How old are you? 10th Avenue
Maybe.
North. Yeah.
Shut up.
Praise
It's
charts.
all about
Praise charts.
this. When I started student ministry, with our students, a lot of them, this is actually a great point, thank
Good.
you. A lot of them come from very chaotic backgrounds, I remember sitting around a table on a mission trip that we had all taken, and every single student going around the table and sharing things, that what they had to let go of in order to be able to follow God. And for most of them, it was, I grew up in a broken home. I feel like my parents don't love me. I'm struggling with my sexuality and how I fit into this equation, that kind of stuff. And so Reckless Love, it's based off of this, and specifically the parable of the sheep. And we used it to really get the students to tune in, because they all very much could relate to the son in that, look, my life is, they couldn't in their background, their background is very different. It's chaotic, it's messy, it's crazy, it's tumultuous, and that resulted in them making choices they weren't proud of, or walking away, or fill in the blank for teenagers. And
all the things that teenagers do.
Right. And then being able to come back and the chorus of the song says, oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Yeah.
I have heard that song. Yep. And I love the way that chorus works out too. It rolls.
Yeah.
The overwhelm. I can't remember the exact melody, but I remember the feeling of the overwhelming, never-ending,
the other
reckless,
significance of that song for me is that song was kind of like a turning point in that ministry and in my position in it. Before I had taken over it was, again, very tumultuous. There was a lot of stuff that had happened, and not only that, within the context of the church, but also in my own personal life. I had gone through a lot of.
So before because I don't want to interrupt you in the middle of your personal life, just background on the church, Aloma UMC went through a radical, drastic structural change. It was a typical white steepled Sunday morning, fairly conservative United Methodist Church.
And it really a lot of we started talking about the changes that needed to happen with the youth group, because before I took over, the youth group was very siloed, and the students were encouraged not to go to service because it would be keeping them away from God and all of that stuff. And so my job as a first-time youth pastor ever was to come in and turn that around.
Integrate the youth group into the congregation.
Yeah, and it was rough. I was fighting adults who were twice my age, teenagers who were yelling and screaming. It was
and also,
messy.
I should say, because I heard I was working somewhere else, but I was friends with John, who was the pastor at the time. So I was getting little snippets of this. And John and I worked very closely for a long time, and our maybe the major thrust of our whole ministry together had to do with integrating congregations into we're not trying to silo off these the children, they'll go over there and they can do all the children stuff, and the youth, how youth are, they we were really very much trying to be no, youth need adults.
This matters.
Children need teenagers to look up to, and teenagers need grandmother and grandfather aged people who aren't related to them, who absolutely just love them and care for them and are elders in their lives,
So before all of this had happened, I guess the reason that song in particular is so impactful and pivotal in my own journey is before I had even started at Aloma, I was constantly told, you're too much to be doing any kind of church work. I had this dream of possibly
Courtney, you're too much.
Going to seminary. I was told I was too much. I was too annoying. I was too loud.
Also not wrong.
I was rowdy. I was crazy.
Wild.
Yeah.
Wild. Yeah.
I'm actually very grateful for the rowdy title.
I
really like I know it's a little bit like Methodist. Methodist was an insult when it was first intended. I think the guy because I don't want to throw shade. I really think the guy who said rowdy, I don't think he meant it harmfully. I think he was playing around and joking.
Oh, yeah.
But it was a little bit of it was a playful jab. It was like, and as soon as I heard it, I was like, by God, that's it. That's exactly what we are.
But I was told, because I went through my own trauma with my own parents getting divorced and like icky relationships with my dad, and I mean we've worked on it, but starting in high school all the way till I began to really start to work through this stuff in college, I was frequently described by multiple people as those things. And all I wanted to do was work in the church and work with teenagers, and I was constantly shut down for it. And so Aloma was my first chance to do that. And so for me, it was kind of like I went from being told you're too much, you're too annoying, you try too hard, you're not good enough, to being told, okay, you're the exact right person for this moment in time that's going to take this crazy, toxic, siloed situation, and you have gifts of bringing people together. And that for me.
And I would say, I wasn't there for that. I'm here for this. I would say, because again, I can't remember if I said this on camera or not, but Matt.
You did say this.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Yeah. The chief evangelist thing, like you and Matt, and there are a couple of other people that I would name, but the fact that you are too much, quote unquote, is
true.
What but it is what is doing the work.
Right.
It's like, yeah, you're too much. Fucking bring it.
Let's
bring
go.
the too much.
Move it along.
We need it. Come on, get on it.
Chug a chug. Gotta have hot coal to move it.
Your quote unquote too much is. I mean, God, I could just list off all the conversations of. I think about all these people who basically have said in one form or another, I didn't think this was possible for me, and now I'm learning that this is possible.
Right.
We were just talking about it in a meeting before this. Sorry to exclude, but you hear the Monday night we're having a Bible study group. Here we go, and then you get there, and we're all 60, and we're talking about Luke, and his name might mean something else, and it ends up getting to football and cloud talk, or we're talking about how to spice your chicken.
How aliens are absolutely real.
Oh my God,
That
here
is
we go again.
No. That's not where it goes. In a normal Bible study group, in quotes, that you hear from a friend going, you should come to my Bible study group. We have a good time there. And it's 20 people reading a book and just telling each other what the words mean.
So most people hear Bible study and they're like, thanks, no thanks.
Yeah.
You seem nice, thanks, no thanks. You
Sounds
know what it
lame.
takes?
Most people that I talk, because this is kind of my whole job.
Well, hold on, wait. You know what it takes to get somebody to overcome that hurdle? It takes too much.
Yeah, that's where we're getting at.
It takes someone being too much. Being like, no. You don't understand. You do need to, trust me. How this is going, that's how this goes. Come on.
I literally have to be, people will be like, so Courtney, what do you do? And I'll be like, oh, I work at a church. And then I'll see their face, and usually it's like,
And you work at a salon.
Yeah, I work at a salon. I work here.
And you're at a gym.
And then I'm very active in a gym.
Yeah.
We've started a dog park, friend group in our complex, and that's 10 people.
We started
big.
a dog park.
Yeah, because we adopted a dog. I mean, the park was there.
We established a dog park.
We have a group chat.
I heard it wrong.
We have a group chat. Anyway, but most people will hear, oh, you work at, and they're like, oh.
Or the shoulder drop too.
Like, oh God,
And
I'm sorry.
That's where this is
I always
going,
laugh, and I always have to say, it's not a normal church, and then I always use the word pretty rowdy. I'm always like, you know what? Honestly, we're pretty rowdy. We don't really enforce the taboos of drinking or smoking cigars or hanging out or partying. We have house
not
parties
rowdy
once a month.
we sneak the wine from the altar there, and it's
Right.
pretty good every now and then. Oh, it's rowdy.
We're pretty open about.
No, I mean,
You know,
we
you
use
shouldn't
the-
be
we
living
use the
two
fuck
separate
word pretty
lives.
We yell.
consistently.
You shouldn't be living two separate lives, you know?
Yeah.
So many people will walk into churches and put on their best suit and tie and then walk out.
Well, so I would say this about that. There are ways, because I've met I've met plenty of people. In fact, so I used to work at First UMC Eustis, older church, older community, and there were some of the like coolest, most authentic
Oh, for sure.
people who have been Christians their whole life, and they like, there was this guy who he would dress to the nines every Sunday.
His name was
Marshall. He looked good too. Like when he did it, I was
and
like,
he knew it. Yeah,
and I would now I tried to dress, because I was in that community, I would try to dress kind of mixed. Because there were some people who really came in like shorts and a polo, you know? And so I would usually wear like, not blue jeans, but maybe like something denim underneath on the bottom, and then like shirt and tie, maybe a vest. So like kind of this mixed kind of thing. But I really like dressing up. I like wearing a suit. And when that guy, and he and I used to like joke back and forth about it. And there were, you know, a couple of times it would go real for him. And he would talk about like why he dresses up. And he's like, what this God has done for me. Like, and he would get into this like, oh shit, this is real for you. Like, and then there are also people who are like, I want to be seen as pretty, you know, like I go because I want people to see me as pretty. And so like, I would say it's important to draw a distinction between, because like to each their own, there are some people who would never use the fuck word because it really is a thing for them. I often say when people ask me, it's like, yeah, but I come by it honestly.
Right.
Like I come by it honestly. It's really how I talk.
And that's what I meant by that.
Yeah, and there like that authenticity is like the thing that's the golden goose that.
It's an act of passion, is what it is, and if it's stifled, now it becomes boring and textbook, and we go back to reading.
It's also rooted in the like, for me, Jesus has spoken explicitly against the letter of the law rule following, and has explicitly invited everyone into a compassionate, sincere, honest, and grace-filled community with a Father who embarrasses himself to run to meet the lost one. You know, like who just utterly just makes a total dumbass fool of himself for the sake of reaching the lost one, who hangs naked and painful on a cross for the chance to reach the lost one. Like, come and be a part of it. It's here for you, I promise. You have a place at this table. Put a ring on his finger, put a robe, put sandals on his feet. Like, that's the God, this God who's stoic on a cloud some way. Like, that's made up. That's not real. That's some bullshit that somebody created to try and control you, man. Like, but this Father who lifts up his robes and runs like embarrassingly towards the person who absolutely doesn't deserve it by any measure of everything. Like, that's the God we worship, the one who runs to the lost, you know? Like, and then from there you can go like, hey, you know what? Maybe it's okay if I wear some jeans. Maybe
it's okay if we're a little rowdy.
Yeah, to say the least, you know?
Yeah.
So, anything else? I feel like we're probably about at an hour or so.
No.
I'm chilling.
That was great.
All right. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious unto you. May the Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. Amen.
Just bought it.
Good job, kid.
I like it. I want it. I got 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 it. You like my hair? Gee, thanks. Just bought it. I see it. I like it. I want it. I got it. Wearing a ring, but ain't gonna be no misses. Bought matching diamonds for 6 of my bitches. I'd rather spoil all my friends with my riches. Think retail therapy's my new addiction.